Welcome to the Creative Force Podcast, a podcast all about empowering you to live in your God-given identity and go after the dreams in your heart. I'm your host, Sharon Stark, and every week we'll be having powerful conversations that will combine practical and biblical wisdom for living your purpose. Let's get started. Hello, and welcome to the Creative Force Podcast. I'm here today with Andrea Keller. Andrea and I first met actually doing a theater show, but it wasn't until a while later that we reconnected when we worked on the same video stories team. I'm so happy to have you here today, Andrea. Welcome. Can you share with the listeners a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, Sharon, thank you so much for having me. I'm honored. I am a little nervous, but I am ultimately excited to be here and to be talking to you and the listeners. And what I primarily do is I'm a storyteller. Andrea Keller, the storyteller.
It rhymes.
Rhymes. I work for Andrew Womack Ministries, and I have the opportunity to collect people's testimonies by interviewing them and then editing their story and telling it in an inspirational way. And then I am the president of Lightbulb Theatre Co, so I write and direct and produce original content for audience members. And then I also create journals so that people can tell their own stories through them. So I like storytelling.
That's awesome. And we're going to dive into all of that. So let's start off first with the Lightbulb Theatre Company. You mentioned that you're the president of that, and it's been going now for 3 years. There's been 10 productions that have been done. And it's just so impressive to me to think that, you know, you love theater, I also love theater, and that you took this passion and you just decided to start something new. Can you dive into the process of getting that started and what that looked like?
Yeah, absolutely. So I grew up, as a little kid, I wanted to be an actress. It was always something I wanted to do. And so I think it's funny because I don't think it's a surprise to my family or friends of like, oh, okay, she actually pursued theater. But I don't think they probably would think I would do it to this extent. I got together with a group of my friends and we decided that we wanted to create a safe place for creative people to learn and grow. And learning is a messy process, so we wanted it to be safe. We wanted to stretch ourselves and learn different things. And at first, Lightbulb kind of was almost much more like a club to where we would meet and we would have classes and we would talk about things we wanted to produce or things that we're working on. And it was really exciting. And then eventually it just developed into, okay, we have an opportunity to perform for kids at Summer Family. And so we put on a 13-minute skit. And it's funny because it was only 13 minutes, but we rehearsed the snot out of it. We did it for like a month of just rehearsals, which it was probably overkill, but for us, it meant so much, even though it was for kids, even though there wasn't many kids. We were honored to be given the opportunity. And it was really exciting. And from there, we put on our first production. And my co-president, Madison Leek, she had written an original one act. And we said, okay, we'll put this on. We don't have a budget. 3 of us came together, each contributing $200. So with a budget of $600.
Love it.
We said, okay, we're going to start a show. And it was really cool because we had no idea what we were doing, but we literally just took it one step at a time. Mm. And people from the community helped us out. Charis Bible College, they lent us props. The Ute Pass Cultural Center, they let us have the building for a weekend for free. Zebra Productions, they lent us lights. So it was all these like companies saying like, okay, we see something in you. We see a little spark. So we want to help you put it on. So we put on the production. It was small but mighty, and it started something big. We made the tickets were free. We didn't sell tickets. It was like, come on in, it's free. It was during 2020, so it was a time when it was like, okay, you guys have to be spread out in the seats. It was in September of 2020. Let me just clarify. It wasn't in the heat of the pandemic. It was fizzling out, but we still had to have COVID regulations. So it was really exciting because we started off small, but we were so grateful, and we needed to start off small. I think that's the thing is, oftentimes we think like, okay, well, if it matters, it needs to be big, it needs to be explosive. But just understanding that it's such a privilege to have the opportunity to create something and have someone even just listen. I mean, even if one person is listening to the podcast, it's what an honor I have to share and give my insight. So that's how it started, and I guess how we're going now is we're on our 10th production. I myself have written 2 adaptions and 3 originals. So
amazing.
Thank you. And I'm not someone, as you probably hear, I'm not eloquent with words, but I think the fun thing is I understand people. And so I think what helped me when it comes to writing is that characters don't need to use big words. I can make my characters country bumpkins, and now, wonderful, I can use small words and they just seem real. And so I kind of found that little hack of, okay, we don't have to be super impressive, we just need to get started. And yeah.
Wow, that's awesome. Okay, you just said something really good there. You said we just need to get started. And you kind of mentioned too that it was just a step-by-step process. So I think a lot of times people, they have these big ideas, but they're really scared to just get started and do something. Like, what would you say to that?
Yeah, well, I know we talked about like this topic being stepping into the unknown. And I think one thing because let me just say, I've never been on a podcast before. Again, I am so honored and I'm humbled by it, but I'm like, Jesus, I don't know what I'm doing. So this is me stepping into the unknown. And something that really was underlined was the word step. And it's stepping into the unknown. It's not taking a long, big jump into the unknown.
Ooh, okay, yeah.
And I think sometimes when we are starting something exciting but scary, we really just need to break it down of, okay, what's the first step?
Exactly, yeah. That's so good.
And I mean, I even remember, like, this is so random, but like thinking of when I first got married and I had to change my last name on everything. And it's overwhelming. Like, so many brides will say that. They're like, it's overwhelming. And it's like, okay, let's just tackle it one day at a time. It's like, today we're going to go to the Social Security office.
Yeah.
And then the next day we're going to go to the DMV. And you just take it one step at a time, and then it's done.
Yeah.
And I think so many times it will just hang over us, whatever we're scared of. We're like, oh, I should do that, but there's 500 things. So instead of tackling it one step at a time, we just let all 500 things hang above our head, and we feel like a failure, or we feel inadequate. Whereas if we were able just to like, okay, I can't do 500 things today, but I can do one.
Yeah.
And that's probably the biggest thing I've kind of learned in this process, and along with everything of just like, okay, what can I do today to make tomorrow?
That's really, really good. And you also said earlier too, you said that learning can be a messy thing. So what would you say about why it's important to really continue to like try to do new things, especially as adults?
So I love that, because let me just say to everyone, if you don't know Sharon personally, she is probably, it's like I'm talking about this, and Sharon, she told me like the other day that she went to, what kind of a class? It was like a...
Yeah, it was like a contact improvisation like dance class, basically.
Yeah, so Sharon is an adult that this doesn't apply to, I would say, as far as she tries everything. But I think we're kind of raised in society, and I'm guilty of this, as once we're an adult, it feels like, okay, you kind of need to know who you are, and anything outside of that, you don't do. So yeah. I think a lot of, I've had people come to our shows and be like, oh, that looks just like so much fun. Oh, I wish I would have done that. Kind of talking in past tense. And it's like, yeah, well, absolutely. We would love to have you join. And they're like, oh, no, I could never. I never learned. And it's like, yeah, well, we can teach you. It's fun. If you think it looks fun, if there's something in you that says like, wow, I want to try that, then try it. Yeah. And I think oftentimes it's just, we feel like, oh, our time is kind of done to learn new things. But I think there's something so exciting of just about how we're made. I heard a preacher recently say, when you're training for your body in like athletics, out of soreness comes strength. And you will at first be sore. So when you do try something, you might be bad at it. But after a while, you won't be. And I think we have to be comfortable at not being the best at things. Yeah, and it's a humility thing of like, okay, I might not look like I'm in control here, and that's okay. And I think once you can give yourself grace to do that, incredible things happen. And one thing, I've been acting, like as far as theater goes, directing and writing, that's something that I started within like the last 5 years. So it's relatively still new to me, whereas I've been acting for like the last 15. And one thing I've noticed when I'm kind of trying to help other actors is they're so afraid to look stupid.
Yeah.
And I'm like, man, if you're afraid to look stupid, then you'll never give an authentic performance. And I will even argue, and this is controversial, but I think I feel like I can say this because I'm a woman, but a lot of women comedians, sometimes they don't hit the mark because I feel like they're afraid to look stupid and unattractive. And then it's like, you can't hit comedy when you do that. It's like, I can recognize, I feel like I'm okay with not looking attractive. And so therefore I'm able to be funny. Not saying ugly faces are the peak of humor, but I think it's just kind of recognizing of like, okay, I might look like an idiot right now, and that might be the humor in it.
Yeah, totally. No, I agree with you. I think I kind of struggle with comedy for that reason, actually, of just like putting yourself out there and just seeming silly. And you even mentioned just like humility. And I do think that is one of the things that trying a lot of new things has kind of taught me, is because you do look really silly in the process. And I'll go to like a dance class that I've never tried before, and I'll feel really just like silly and like embarrassed and like, am I doing this right? But kind of going over that like feeling and going over that fear and not caring what people think about you, I think that it's just really freeing. And then you find new things that you really enjoy doing, and it's fun. So you did mention that you also have written some of the shows for Lightbulb. Can you tell us a little bit about that process of writing something and how you overcome writer's block?
Yeah, I think the fun thing is another part of even just taking a step is when I've written a show, I didn't actually go into it being like, today we're going to write a show. I try to give myself exercises to do either a few times a week of just like, okay, here's a prompt and we're going to write a scene. For me, when it comes to writing, I don't write novels. I like writing dialogue. So it's easy for me to write a monologue or a scene or something like that. So usually when I have a writing prompt, I'm like, okay, we're just going to write like a short little scene. And usually it's like, it'll be a page or two that I write, and it'll just be a random prompt. I can find prompts online. I have a little notebook full of prompts. So it'll be random. I've written scenes that are cute. I've written scenes that are bad. I've written scenes that will not see the light of day. And then I've written scenes that I kind of thought, I was like, hey, that's interesting. I just kind of started in the middle of the scene, based on the prompt, based on just a random thing that inspired me. And I kind of want to see where these characters, where did they come from, and where are they going? And that's how I started By Your Side. Was I had a prompt that was, I had 3 words, and basically you had to incorporate the 3 words somehow into your writing prompt. And the words were fox, feather, and coffee mug. And out of those 3 words, I think the first thing I thought of was fox, like, oh, a silver fox, like a graying, handsome man. Yeah. And then feather, I thought of a woman's feathered hair. Random.
Oh,
and then
very creative.
Coffee mug, it kind of gave me a location of like, okay, we're going to do like a diner. And so I wrote a scene between kind of a couple who were a couple at one point but aren't, and it's years later. So it's one of those kind of awkward, reconnection years after a flame has died in a coffee shop. And I wrote that and I was like, oh, these characters are kind of cute. I kind of like this dynamic. I like that there's hope, but we also don't know where it's going. And from that, it actually became the last scene in my play By Your Side. And so it's kind of like I was able to work backwards of just like, okay, where would this come from? And with that scene, I mean, the original is different than what ended in By Your Side, but it inspired it and it's very heavily influenced. And I would say even with writer's block, something that has helped me is just thinking, okay, what needs to happen in this story? What needs to be conveyed? What's lacking? Another thing I'll even ask myself is like, what two characters haven't interacted? And let's just start putting characters together. And like, there are scenes that haven't made it into a show because they're not very good. But it's me saying, oh, like, okay, we're going to have Mick and Vicky in a scene together. Let's see how that goes. All right, now let's write a scene with these two people. And then it's like, okay, interesting. I liked what happened, but I don't know if I do like that it happened with that character. What if it happened with this character? So it's a lot of playing and discovering what I want and what I don't want. And something that has helped as well, Stephen King wrote in his book, I think it's called On Writing, that he said he'll write his first draft and then he'll put it in on a shelf for 6 weeks and not look at it. And then after 6 weeks, he reads it and then he's able to basically kill his darlings, which is, the term of, things that you thought maybe were a stroke of genius at one point, you're realizing it's not adding to your show. It's just something that means something to you. But yeah, I mean, writer's block absolutely does happen. So I would say the biggest thing is to continue writing. And even if that means putting down that project and even just starting another project that's not going to go anywhere, but just to get your mind flowing and just to remind yourself that you can still write and give yourself other ideas, I think that's probably the biggest thing.
Wow, that's really good, just to continue the process. And how, because you mentioned that you do the writing prompts and all of that, how have you seen consistency change your writing?
I would say that with consistency in all things, you learn that it does get easier. It doesn't take as long. I think that you have to realize that there's always going to be a process. That doesn't mean the process goes away. It doesn't mean that you can just, sneeze out a show. But it's kind of like running for me. I started running 4 years ago. And I literally started running 4 years ago, meaning I ran my first mile. And
which is incredible because, wait, how many marathons have you done now?
So I've done 5 half marathons.
Wow.
And I'm training for a marathon now, like a full-on marathon.
Which is so impressive, just starting 4 years ago.
And I mean, the funny thing is the reason I started my first mile was because I signed up for a half marathon. And so I already signed up, money's already submitted. It's for Disney World, so it was a lot of money. Absolutely worth it. Let me just plug that. Always do a Disney race. Incredible. But anyway, I was terrified because I ran a mile and I was like, dear Jesus, I don't know if I can do this. I can't do this. I'm literally running on a treadmill and I'm praying. I'm like, God, who am I in you? And it was terrible. And it was so hard. And I think the thing is it was so scary because it was like, this first mile is hard and I have to do that times 13.1. And my first race that I did, was it incredible? No, but I don't even know somehow why I signed up again. I think there was just, I don't know, maybe it's insanity or something like that. Because like the first time I did it, I was like, oh, that was really hard. I think I knew that I didn't know what I was doing. And the fact that I did finish it, that was addicting of like, okay, I didn't do incredible, but I finished.
Yeah.
And for me, the fact that I've never really run before and I did this is impressive for me. And I think I wanted to chase that and actually get better and good.
Yeah.
And I think all that to say, kind of trying to tie it into the writing, is I'm now running and it's easier. I can run faster and harder. I was running at 4 miles per hour when I first started and I couldn't breathe. And now my average is like 6.5 miles per hour. And there are people who will listen to this and be like, oh, well, I can run, an 8-minute mile. Incredible. I'm really proud of you. But I think the thing is I can't compare myself to someone else. And that's comparison is the thief of joy. You know, and the thing is I can't compare my race with your race. I can only know what I've been able to accomplish. And it's been really cool because in the last 4 years, I've gotten faster and stronger each race. I've gotten, like, the last 2 races, I've actually been able to enjoy them. Like, I end it and I'm smiling and I'm like, and I'm ready for the next one. And so that's really exciting for me because the first time I finished my race, I was like, oh gosh, God help me, God. You know, it was so desperate. And so I think kind of with everything we do, even with writing, even with doing theater, like putting on, like I said, that 13-minute skit that I did for the kids, that was a lot. I put everything into it and I was so excited, but that took a lot out of me. But now I can put on a whole hour-and-a-half show. I can have the show have so many more dynamic things happening in it, and I'm not putting forth more effort. It's just you grow in your capacity, you become stronger. And that's the exciting thing about getting out of your comfort zone, because you can't grow in your comfort zone.
Yeah.
It's Vincent van Gogh says something about, he says something about normalcy. It's a pretty road, but no flowers grow on it, but more poetic. But I think that's the thing, is just recognizing of you can live a life that is comfortable, but exciting things aren't going to happen, and nothing extraordinary is going to come from comfortable.
That's really good about stepping out of your comfort zone, and just the fact that that consistency can produce that your capacity is increasing. That's so good. And you recently, not that long ago, started your own Etsy store, the Bouquet of Pencils. Can you tell us a little bit about like that process? Like what made you want to step out and do that?
Yeah, so it's funny because I remember like that was something that you mentioned of like, oh yeah, like what was it like stepping out? And I think what I told you, I was like, oh, I guess I didn't even realize that was something, because I've done things that seemed scary, starting a theater company and putting on shows and being vulnerable and being like, this show means something to me and I hope you care about it. It feels like this was something so small in comparison.
Yeah.
To where like,
because you had increased your capacity.
Exactly. So to where it's like starting an Etsy shop, I'm like, okay, I don't know much about finances and stuff, but like I've done stuff that I didn't know before and I've been able to conquer it, that it didn't seem as scary. And I remember I was just kind of, it was like about last summer, I was praying to God and I was like, God, I really just want to get a little bit extra income, because when it comes to Lightbulb, everything we make goes back into the company. It's not making me rich. And that's how we want it. And it's exciting. But I wanted something to where I'm like, I can, have a little money to go to Disney World and have fun, or just have a side hustle. And so I prayed about it. And then a few nights later, I remember I couldn't sleep. And I was just I feel like I'm a night owl. So I think a lot of my weird, random ideas come at night. And so I was basically just kind of getting ideas. And I thought about how I love collecting journals. I have way too many journals. It's my weakness, to where I'll go somewhere and I'm like, that's a beautiful journal. And that's what I want. And quotes are also something that I absolutely love, to where if someone says like quote something, I'll like put it on my wall in my office. I have a lot of sticky notes all over my office. It's pretty tacky, with just beautiful words though. And I thought, what if I engraved quotes onto journals and sold them? And with each journal, I gave away a bouquet of pencils. And it was something that I was like, oh, this feels really random and out of the blue. And like, I don't know what would inspire this. So then I just started doing a little bit of research of like, okay, where could I get a notebook? Where could I get a machine to actually engrave books? And my husband was like, okay, let's find something on eBay. And so we found like an old machine from like the 1940s that someone was selling. And we bought that. And then I got a few books. And I think the thing is like I made like maybe like a $200 investment with the machine or whatever. I was like, okay, this could not work. And that's the thing. It's like when you do things like this, it's like, okay, this could not work.
Yeah, there's a little risk involved.
Right. But it kind of like, I told myself, I was like, worst case scenario, I'm $200 in the hole. And it's not even like I went into debt. It's like I took $200 from my savings. I'm like, yeah, worst case scenario, this. Let's just try it. And then I even told myself, as I was able to, like, you know, I was glad to find out that I could figure out how to engrave the books. I was like, okay, it's easy. I'm capable of this. Worst case scenario, no one buys the books and I keep the notebooks. I'm like, make something that I find pretty. And so I did that, and then I went on Etsy, and it took me a few days to set up the shop, not because it was difficult, but because I kind of needed to take it one step at a time. I didn't know what I was doing. It's like, it's fairly simple, but it's like, okay, you need some pictures. Okay, let's set up a photo shoot. Let me get, like, my brother who's really good at taking photos. He's going to help me. Then it's like, okay, come up with a name. I'm like, oh, we're going to call it the Bouquet of Pencils because I'm giving away pencils. Write a description, like little things like that, to where it's like when you take it one step at a time, it becomes manageable. And then I started the Etsy shop, and I told people on Facebook, I like made a little Facebook post. I'm like, hey, I don't make Facebook posts, but I started a shop if anyone's interested. And then it's cute because, you know, you have friends that it's like, oh, I'm making a book for Sharon, you know, something to where people support you. And it was pretty small. And then I think the exciting thing is like it's grown to where it's not now strangers buy it. I'm actually at 97 sales right now. I'm like,
I actually looked at that. I was going to say, I was like, do you know you've almost hit 100?
Yeah. And the cool thing is I've done markets outside of Etsy. So I've made more than 100. I've probably made about 300 books and things like that.
Oh, wow.
As far as like Etsy sales, it's like I'm almost at 100, and like, you know, like maybe 5 of them were from friends. So it's exciting because then you have strangers leaving reviews that are like, I think these books are beautiful and it's the sweet gift and I love how it was wrapped. And it's like, you're not just saying that to make me happy. You're saying that because you mean it. And so it's been a really just kind of fun, exciting thing. And it's cool too because I think there's something fun about making something and having it be beautiful and giving it to someone else. And also these are words that mean something to them. So these are quotes that matter to them, that inspire them. And it's cool to see what inspires other people. Yeah. What tugs on their heartstrings. And to kind of be a part of that little process of like, oh, I hope this really encourages them as they journal or write or just jot down or whatever they do with the journal. So it's a really cool thing to be a part of.
That's awesome. That's so cool. And on this whole theme of stepping into the unknown, stepping out of your comfort zone, you've also started something recently that's really cool, and that is your whole 30 things that you're doing before 30. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So I'm 28 right now, and I turned 30 October of 2024. At this point, that's about a year and 3 months away. So I started it in January of 2023, and I think how it came about was because it's the new year. You're like, what are the goals that I want to have for this year? And I was kind of starting to think about that, and I was like, you know, it'd be kind of fun to do like a lot, like 30 goals. And I was like, oh, you know, what if I did 30 before 30? Because that sounds fun and catchy. And then I thought, okay, let's start this. Let's give ourselves like a little more than a year to do 30 things before you're 30. Mm-hmm. Because I didn't want to overwhelm myself. Because I don't want to set myself up for failure. If I'm writing down 30 things that I want to get done before I'm 30, I don't want to be like, oh yeah, well, I'm going to go to the moon. Because it's like,
it's like, it's good having reasonable goals that you can hit.
Exactly. And so I wanted to give myself a good amount of time of like, okay, we're going to give myself more than a year to do it, but we're starting right now. So I think it was 20 months I had to get 30 things done. And it's been a lot of fun because I think for me, I will say to everyone who's 30 and older that this is not a sign of help. I'm not afraid of turning 30. I'm looking forward to it. In fact, this October, it is my golden birthday. So I'm turning 29 on the 29th, and I'm excited. Oh, nice. I've been looking forward to that like my whole life. So age doesn't scare me at all. Yeah. But I think deadlines are a really good way to get things done. And I think for me, it was a way of saying like, okay, what are some things that you said, yeah, someday maybe, that have never come to pass? And there are things like on my list that was like, I want to take fencing lessons. I took fencing lessons spoiler, I am terrible. I'm not a fencer, but it was fun.
Yeah.
And I was able to try it, and now I can say I did it. Another one is I wanted to read 30 books in the amount of 20 months, and because I want to read more. I want to just be better read, because I feel like that was something that when I became an adult, I stopped reading. Weirdly.
Yeah, that's true. A lot of adults just stop reading.
It's easy to do, but it's like, let me tell you, I'm on the book of Facebook and I hate it. You know, it's like you could be addicted to social media, but it's like, why are we doing this? I don't even care about this. This is making me antisocial. I was like, I want to read more. And so I've kind of gotten addicted to reading, and I have read 18 books. So I'm way ahead of schedule, because I calculated if I do 2 books a month, I'll make it. I've done more than that, so I'm happy about that. Another one is I wanted to run a full marathon.
Yeah.
Because I had done half marathons, and full marathon, that scares the crap out of me.
But you're doing it.
I'm doing it. And that's the thing. I think that's, for me, a half marathon is now my comfort zone. And it's funny because it's like,
wow.
it's hard. It's not that it's like, oh, and it's easy, but I know that I have done it and I can do it. And a full marathon, it's twice as long. That's the thing, is like, it's hard, and it's twice as hard as a half. So it's the thing of like, okay, this is going to take a lot of preparation. But the thing with doing training for a race in general is like, right now I'm not running 26.2 miles as I'm training. I'm taking it 1 mile at a time. So like, your first day of training, you do run 1 mile, and it's great. You're like, I can do 1 mile. And then you progressively get to 2 miles, and then 4 miles, and then 6 miles, and then on and on. And I think that's kind of the point of like, when it comes to stepping out of your comfort zone, it's a step. Yeah. It's not, you can't just fully be like, okay, now I'm running 26.2 miles. If I try that right now, I'll kill myself. You can't just do that without training. You have to exercise those muscles and take it a step at a time and be kind to yourself, because some days it is easier. When I've trained for my half marathon, I'll have mile 8 be so hard, and then the next week I'm like, mile 8 was hard. I can't imagine what mile 9 is like. And somehow mile 9 is easier. Like doing it does, like some weeks your body is just more fatigued than others, so you have to give yourself grace. But yes, I'm doing 30 things before I'm 30, and it's been fun. I'm excited.
Yeah, it's really exciting. So how many have you done right now out of the 30? Do you know?
I would say I probably have about 7 done.
Okay, that's awesome. And I really like too what you just said about giving yourself grace. Maybe you miss a day, but even if you miss a day, it's like you don't beat yourself up, that you just go back into that, whether it's fitness or whatever goal that you have, that you just kind of pick up where you started, even if you miss a day. For anyone who has been listening and they're like thinking of stuff and they're like, oh man, I really want to step out and try something, what would you just say to encourage them?
I would say do it. Absolutely. One thing, I love quotes. That's something I told you guys. There's a quote that says, but what if I fall? And it's like, but my dear, what if you fly? And you can't fly grounded. And that's the thing. It's like, you do have to take that step. As someone who has failed, who has fallen on her face, who has looked silly in front of others, it's interesting because once it happens, it's kind of like, you know what? It wasn't that bad. And I have even gone to the point of talking myself, off a cliff of like, okay, you're freaking out. You don't want to do it because you're scared. And that's what a lot of times why we don't step out of our comfort zone is because of fear. And asking myself, I'm like, what is actually the worst thing that can happen? And then realizing, because it might just be people, I go on a podcast and I make myself look stupid and people think I'm stupid. It's like, okay, that's really not that bad.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, it's like, okay, yeah, that's the worst thing. What's the best thing that can happen? Someone could actually be inspired to take a step. And I think even like as Christians, I was even thinking about that because I am not a street evangelist. That's not in my wheelhouse. But there's something to where, you think about like, oh, maybe I'll go talk to someone about Jesus. And then you're like, well, what if I say the wrong thing? And what if I say the wrong thing so much that they never see Jesus or never want to know about Jesus? And it's like, well, let's talk about that. How could it go that bad?
Yeah.
Like, really, what do you plan on saying? Like, I mean, that's the thing is, like, if your heart is to love people and you just want them to know about God's love, and really the worst thing that could happen is they're like, that's weird that you believe in God. That's the worst thing that could happen. And it's like their salvation is worth so much more than the fear of humiliation. If you show them the love of God, the worst they can do is just say, that's good for you, not me. And you did your job. And I think that's the thing. I told you, Sharon, this the other day. An actor's job is to audition. Getting a part is a bonus. And that can be applied in so many areas of life. Our job is to try. The result we can't control. That's a gift. And so if you are trying your best, if you put your whole heart into it, good will come out of it. And if it's not as good as you want it to be, try again.
Oh, yeah.
So
that's so good. Get out there, guys, and just go ahead and try. For everyone who's been listening, where can they connect with Lightbulb Theater, with your business, the Bouquet of Pencils, and even just follow your 30 Things Before 30 journey?
So you can go to lightbulbtheatre.co. We are spelled theater with R-E. We're the classic way. Lightbulbtheatre.co to just see our website. If you look us up on Instagram or Facebook, you'll find us, lightbulbtheatre.co. And then also with the Bouquet of Pencils, if you go to my Etsy shop, you can type in the Bouquet of Pencils and order your customized notebook there. And we can create a promo code. Do you have a little description to where people?
Yes, there are show notes, so we can put that in the show notes.
Yeah, so look in the show notes. We'll have a little promo code to give you 10% off on your order for listening to this podcast, for bearing with us. And then, if you want to follow me on Instagram, my Instagram is the Bouquet of Pencils. So that's the way to follow us and see what we're doing. And I'm trying to post about my 30 before 30 as much as possible, but I'm also trying to not be addicted to social media. So it's a balance of like, I'll post, but I'm also trying to be more present in the moment rather than online.
That's good. Be present. Thank you so much, Andrea, for joining me on this show today. It was so great to talk to you.
Thank you, Sharon.
Thank you so much for listening to today's podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, it would mean so much to me if you did two things. First, subscribe, and second, leave a rating and review. Subscribing makes it easy for you to know when new episodes are out, and giving a rating and review helps iTunes to suggest this podcast to other people who would also like it. Thank you so much. The show notes for today's episode are available on my blog at yourcreativeforce.com, as well as other resources and inspiration to go after your dreams.